As he's still on the phone with the governor and is running a little bit late at the moment. With that being said, I'd like to call to order this morning's meeting, which is the action agenda meeting of the Commonwealth Transportation Board. And first up, I'd like to ask Sean Nelson, the district engineer, to, well, Secretary's going to make an appearance, so he's already in. All right. Well, the Secretary.
Morning.
Morning.
Call the meeting to order, and I was just going to call up Sean Nelson to introduce a special guest for us. So I'll continue with that. Sean, if you could come up.
Morning. So yesterday we had talked about partners. So this morning we have Albemarle County Board of Supervisors member Ann Malik, who represents the Whitehall District, who's been on the board in Albemarle County since 2008, serving in that capacity, to say a few words of welcome to you all.
Good morning, welcome.
Good morning to all of you. And first off, thank you all for the work that you do and your predecessors have done. I've come to these public engagement meetings since the early 90s off and on to advocate for projects here. Hopefully while you're in the area, you'll get to drive over some of the wonderful advances we've made on the 29 Solutions project that you all were involved in just within the last 10 years. It's really important, the work that you all do and with communities together. But I want to welcome you to Albemarle because we don't get to see you very often, and we want to make the most of that. And I hope that you will come back again when you have more time. I understand you had a very long meeting yesterday, so bring your families back, follow that map that was in your goodie bag when you checked in, and I hope that we will see you all very soon. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having us. It's great to be here. Appreciate it a lot. First, let me apologize for being late this morning. I'd asked my board yesterday if they would indulge me because I had something I had to do this morning in the interest of the Commonwealth. It was successful, so I appreciate the support there. We have public comment period to open this meeting, and we have 4 speakers that have signed up. I'm just going to call them in order. You know, we have a 3-minute rule, which I routinely ignore if I like what you're saying, and I'm very strict if I don't, so you'll know what we think about it, what I think about it. No, we try to adhere to that as best we can, but we want to hear from y'all. That's why we have this period, and so say what you'd like to say and try to be succinct. So the first person that signed up on the agenda this morning is Mr. George Mapp. Mr. Mapp, good morning. Nice to see you, sir.
Thank you. Wasn't able to get to Bristol last
well,
month.
we strung you out a little bit out west, right? Made it a little more difficult for you to get there.
I'm here to give an update on the Eastern Shore Rail Trail. We achieved a major milestone last month. All the rails and ties have been removed now, so we're definitely shovel ready. We continue to pursue funding at federal and state level. We hope to find out next month on our $23 million RAISE grant application, and also our $8 million Smart Scale project. We're hoping to hear about those next month. For the town of Parksley, we've submitted a request for earmarks from Senator Kane and Warner, and we hope to hear back from them later on in the summer. If that doesn't go through, we, as a fallback for the town of Parksley, we're going to apply for transportation alternative TAP funds for that. We've been working with the VDOT project manager, Jerry Pauley, on our project. We're looking at a budget shortfall now of about $700,000, and we're looking at ways to reduce those, the construction cost and the scope of the project. We're probably going to eliminate some of the parking lots that we have planned. And there's something called design build that Jerry Pauley was saying that perhaps we could, since it's a rail trail, the terrain is flat, we don't have bridges or tunnels or anything, that we just give them sketches, the contractor sketches, and say, go build it. And if we can do that, we can reduce our engineering cost and also the completion time of the project, which will reduce the costs that we built in for inflation. So that's basically where we're at. If VDOT estimates no significant environmental impact. So if we get the funding in place, we could get started construction as early as July. So that's where we're at now.
Great news.
And thank you very much for your support.
Thanks, Mr. Mapp, and thank you for keeping us updated on your progress. Really appreciate seeing you. The next speaker that signed up is Mr. Jason Stanford. Jason is the president of the Northern Virginia Transportation Alliance, sir. It's always good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, members of the Commonwealth Transportation Board, for the opportunity to comment today. As the Secretary just said, my name is Jason Stanford, and I'm the president of the Northern Virginia Transportation Alliance. We are a partnership of business and community leaders who champion regional multimodal transportation improvements in Northern Virginia. First, I'd just like to say that the Alliance supports the inclusion of the Fairfax County Route 7 project in the Smart Scale Consensus scenario. Thank you for funding this important project. Also wanted to say that we are supportive of Fairfax County's renaming request that's before you today as well. I also would like to just take a quick moment to talk a little bit about Smart Scale. To be clear, Smart Scale's data-driven approach has been an important step forward for Virginia. However, after 10 years and 5 rounds, there remains more room for improvement. First, if you look at the last 3 rounds of Smart Scale, the amount of funding requests appears to have a significant impact on which projects are selected. In round 3, 8 of the 12 lowest funding requests in Northern Virginia were funded. In round 4, 9 of the 12, and in round 5, 10 of the 12. While cost should always be a factor, the current system prioritizes smaller projects with smaller benefits because the larger benefits of larger projects are minimized by the complicated nature of this system. This complicated process makes it difficult to apply for funding and requires submitting applications, often with limited details, for a project that might not be started for 5 or 6 years. This creates significant ambiguity in the accuracy of the data and increases the ability to manipulate the process to earn desired funding for politically favorable projects. Furthermore, the primary goal of our transportation system should be making it easier to move more people and goods throughout our Commonwealth. Unfortunately, Smart Scale sometimes falls short of identifying those projects. For example, in round 4, the highest scoring project in Northern Virginia had a congestion mitigation score of 0, safety score of 0, accessibility score of 0, environmental score of 0, economic development score of 0.5, and a land use score of 19.5. In other words, the location of this project in one of Virginia's denser communities was not just the primary benefit, but the sole benefit of that project. The surrounding job and population densities tell us little about the quality of a project. It simply prioritizes projects in urban areas over suburban and rural ones. With only 7 projects exceeding 30 total benefit points in the last 3 rounds of Smart Scale, and that's for all of the projects submitted, a purely location-based score worth 20 points is a significant advantage. We should give moving people the greatest weight in Northern Virginia, with other factors limited to no more than 25% of the total score. It's time to simplify the Smart Scale system, improve Virginia's data-driven approach, and enhance our focus on transportation projects that increase mobility. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Stanford. Appreciate you coming, and thanks for your thoughts. As you know, we're in the midst of trying to do some of those things you're talking about, so the more input is the better. Appreciate it. And now signed up is Mr. Jeff McKay. Mr. Jeff is the chairman of the board of the Fairfax Board of Supervisors. Mr. McKay, welcome. Nice to see you, sir.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see you, and thank you all for your service and for lowering my blood pressure today. Driving down was a scenic ride down here this morning, which was nice. I am here simply to support the road naming change that's before you for Route 50 and Route 29, and to reassure you that our board went through extensive outreach on this subject over multiple years, and that our board stands very strongly in support of this name change by a vote of 9-1. But I just want to go back in time just to let you know that, we started this effort by creating a Confederate Names Task Force back in July of 2021. And this group met over a long period of time, 11 meetings in person and virtual to gain public support, but also awareness for the public. We wanted people to weigh in on these name changes, and we did, in fact, get a lot of people that weighed in. We did an online survey. I know a lot of the background information, I'm not going to go in great detail because all of this has been provided to the CTB, but we had nearly 23,000 people respond to this name-changing request. And normally when you solicit input from the public, you're going to more likely hear from a lot of people opposed to something than for it. And yet, of those 23 respondents, it was a pretty close call between people who supported the name change and people who opposed it. But when we asked them, what would you change the name to, overwhelmingly, the public supported simplicity. Just calling them by their root numbers, which is what we as a Board of Supervisors supported, and what we're petitioning the CTB to do is to simply change these names to Route 29 and Route 50. Cut out any future controversy or challenges with the motoring public trying to figure out all these different road names throughout our region, and Lord knows there's enough of them in Northern Virginia that can change multiple times. In fact, this road in Fairfax City is 3 different names in just small Fairfax City. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't further confusing people. I do want to talk a little bit about the one thing that gave our board pause and gave me pause as chairman, which is the imposition on the businesses and residents along this corridor of a name change. And so we not only reached out to them and heard back from them, but we have directed money be set aside through a grant program to help them pay for any administrative costs that they might incur in making these name changes happen. And so our board not only is picking up the $1.4 million tab for changing the signs as would be required through this process, but also is setting aside $1.5 million to help anyone who requests financial assistance. And per our own surveys, that's approximately 500 residences and 900 businesses along those 2 corridors combined. You know those corridors, there's a lot of addresses along there. We want to be as helpful as we possibly can. Aside from the technical components, this is an important economic development opportunity for us in Fairfax County. I'll be candid with you. We don't get to go back and change our history, but we do get to decide what in our history we want to celebrate and what we don't want to celebrate. And frankly, when I think about Fairfax County today, Fairfax County is number 1 in the DMV region for minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. We have nearly twice the national average share of minority-owned employers. And our minority-owned firms in Fairfax County total 8,000 and 85,000 employees working for those minority-owned firms, and that is 33% of all of our county payroll in business taxes. So minority-owned businesses are literally the heart and soul of our reputation in Fairfax County. We built an inclusive economy, one we're very proud of, to be the economic engine of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we've done that by promoting the diversity that we have in the region. And the symbols that we have, including signage right after international travelers get out of Dulles International Airport, some of the first symbols that they see about the inclusive economy that we have in Fairfax County are not necessarily the symbols that make them feel good and make them want to invest and continue to invest in Northern Virginia. And so this was not a close call for us in terms of the right thing to do, but it was a heavily debated question about what we could do to ease the impact. And I think we have a package here, not only is the right thing to do, but also is a companion with that is a package and a financial commitment from our board to make sure that any harm or challenges or inconveniences that the public might have with this name change has been accommodated. And so I look forward to any questions that you might have, and certainly the CTB's support for this, which has always been a routine process in the past. And I know there were some questions raised at the last meeting. I just wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to clarify those for you so that you had all the information necessary to make a decision on this. And hopefully you can support this today and we can move on to the next stage. But again, appreciate your time and would be glad to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you being here. Our next speaker is Meredith Richards, Virginia Rail Policy Institute. Morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
You're welcome to Charlottesville.
Thank
It's
you.
my home.
Glad to be here.
Secretary Miller and Commissioner Rich and Director DeBrule and CTB members, good morning. I'm Meredith Richards, President of the Virginia Rail Policy Institute. I also chair the National Association of Railroad Passengers, which is the nation's oldest and largest passenger rail advocacy organization. But I'm here today to talk for VRPI, or the Rail Policy Institute. It was founded in 2002. We are an assemblage of former and present rail executives, rail operations managers, transportation law and environmental law managers, or practitioners, transportation economists, urban planners, former elected officials, and university researchers. Our mission is to strengthen and improve public policy with respect to both freight and passenger rail in the Commonwealth. We engage in objective and rigorous research, publication, education, and outreach to increase public understanding of freight and passenger rail and promote public policies that will secure the future of rail transportation in Virginia. We host seminars and webinars. We produce papers and reports by our in-house rail professionals and transportation policy experts. I invite you to view our website. I learned to my chagrin that our server's down this morning, so I can't help you there this morning. Among the reports and commentaries, though, that we've sent you during the past year was our January 2022 report on multi-use trails and the protection of Virginia rail lines, our June 22 brief on the state of the U.S. freight rail industry entitled Slip Sliding Away, Freight Rail Transportation Market Share by our founder, Dick Beatles. A July 2022 report on our extensively documented New River Valley Rail Facilities Tour, and more recently, Dick Beatles' commentary, A Veteran Railroader's Perspective on East Palestine and the Rail Industry's Future, which was nationally distributed by Railway Age magazine. The transportation sector is now the largest user of fossil fuels, contributing to global warming, with trucks, cars, and airlines the leading consumers of petroleum products. In contrast, passenger and freight rail reduce our dependency on fossil fuels, are more economical than highways in both capital and operating cost, and make far less demands on land use for transportation purposes. We know that building more lanes of highway to solve congestion is like buying bigger pants to solve obesity. It just doesn't work. I love that one. It simply induces bigger problems in the future. We encourage the CTB to take an active interest in examining how best to mainstream rail transportation into all your transportation planning and funding programs for Virginia. VRPI stands ready to help identify best practices and recommend public policies that will increase our reliance on rail as a cost-effective, sustainable, and essential element of Virginia's 21st century transportation system to benefit all our citizens and Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Richards. Appreciate you being here. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak during the public comment period that did not sign up? Pollard, welcome.
Good morning, Secretary Miller, members of the board. I'm Trip Pollard. I'm the head of the Land and Community Program for the Southern Environmental Law Center, nonprofit group based here in Charlottesville. And I wanted to touch base briefly on two things, Smart Scale and the 6-year plan. In March, we submitted a letter on behalf of 19 nonprofit organizations about Smart Scale, stressing our appreciation for initiating the review that's currently ongoing, and we heard a lot of great information and discussion about that yesterday. Overall, it's clear that the smart scale process delivers results for Virginia. It's a huge improvement over the system that we had previously, which was often very opaque, to say the least. And smart scale has been nationally recognized for the data-driven, transparent process that it is. We also note there have been a couple of previous in-depth studies of smart scale, both by CTB and OIP in 2017 and JLARC in 21. But again, we do believe, as always, there are rooms for improvement in any system. And we do think there are three key areas responsible for the success of smart scale that we would urge you to keep paramount as you conduct your reviews and discussions. That's the award of funding based on benefits relative to costs, a data-based evaluation of project benefits, and transparency and accountability. We recognize no process is perfect, so there are some areas we would encourage the review to examine, and that's opportunities for additional transparency, greater emphasis on quantification and reduction of air pollution, including greenhouse gas emissions, and increasing the weight given to environmental impacts and land use factors. Overall, however, we urge you not to make any too major changes because it is a system that's working very well, and to focus instead on a handful of issues that have been identified and using and capitalizing, as I know you are doing, on data-driven analysis. Regarding the 6-year plan, there are a number of good projects in the plan, but it's not going to get us to where we need to go in terms of developing a safer, cleaner, more equitable, and more accessible transportation system. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Virginia by far, and a significant source of other harmful pollutants. Unfortunately, the vast majority of funding in this draft 6-year plan is allocated to projects that are likely to increase these emissions overall. Greater funding of transit, rail, and other multimodal improvements is essential to achieving the Commonwealth's goals that the General Assembly has set for emissions reduction, to improving accessibility for all to the transportation system, to making our communities more resilient to climate change, and to protecting the climate health and the public health. The historic amount of federal infrastructure funding that's both from the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act gives us some important additional opportunities to advance the ball in terms of meeting our goals for a smarter, cleaner, more accessible transportation system. I know that the Secretary and the Governor have expressed a number of times the commitment that they want to get as much of this money as possible for Virginia, and applaud you for that, and would urge you to fully pursue the opportunities that this once-in-a-generation funding presents to pursue a cleaner and safer transportation system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pollard. Appreciate you being here. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. They were distributed in your package. Are there any, Mr. Merrill?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second. Is there a second? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Very much. Next item on the agenda is item number 1, Mr. Robbie Prezioso, action on highway renaming portion of US Route 29 to Route 29 in Fairfax County, located within the Northern Virginia District. Mr. Preziosi.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
These first two items that are on your agenda today were brought forward last month, and I believe we got a good explanation this morning from the chairman of the board in Fairfax. The first item is the renaming of US Route 29 from Lee Highway to Route 29 in Fairfax County. I'll point out to you that the county did pass a resolution in September of 2022, and I am available for your questions, and I'm sure the chairman would also be available for questions as well.
Mr. Secretary,
Ms. Hines.
I move approval.
Motion to
Second.
approve. Mr. Casper, second. Further discussion?
Mr. Secretary,
Dodson?
I'd like to put a substitute that obviously we had gotten a letter from a fellow board member, Ty Lawson, who had some legal issues that he was concerned with, that he contacted the Assistant Attorney General. And he sent a letter to you, and we made copies to all of us. And I'd like to have a substitute motion that we delay the vote until he's here in our June meeting.
For second.
Second.
Second, who seconded? Laird seconded. So we have a motion and a second as a substitute. Further discussion on the substitute, Mr. Merrill?
Not on the substitute, I'm sorry, but I had an alternative.
Well, we're going to vote on the substitute first. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Laird?
may I speak to the substitute?
Yes, sir.
I think what we're dealing with are two issues. The first issue has to do with Fairfax's proposal, and on the surface and with the explanation of Mr. McKay, I find nothing wrong with that. But we were asked by another CTP member about a language and a policy that the board should develop, and we asked our counsel, the Assistant Attorney General, to respond to that. And to my knowledge, we have not heard a response to his questions. I'm not saying we're not going to arrive at the same conclusion, but he did ask some, I think, legitimate questions, and I think the board deserves to have an answer on those questions before it votes.
Mr. Laird, let me give you some assistance. I did talk to the Assistant Attorney General a couple days ago, and when we were in the meeting last time and we discussed this, it was clear to me what the statute said. It was very plain. It's very plainly written, and it speaks to guidelines to be developed when you name something after a private entity, and only a private entity. That's the only thing that it addresses. It's very clear in the statute. The Assistant Attorney General read the statute, told me it's very clear in the statute what it says, that there's no requirement or suggestion or recommendation to create guidelines when it's not dealing with private entities, and that was what Mr. Lawson's question was. Should we have guidelines? And there are some concerns that he raised about the private entity guideline process that had not been completed, but it's just not germane to this. This is not a private entity. That's not what they're recommending we name this after. They're recommending we name it Route 29. This is not germane to the conversation. So my position, I was clear when I read the statute in the last meeting what it said. I'm still clear about it. The Attorney General has told me that they're clear about it. And so for me, that's where we are. I didn't think it was very unclear to begin with, Mr. Laird, so I was just trying to add some credence to the...
Mr. Secretary, would it not have been appropriate for the Assistant Attorney General to put that in writing for all to see?
It was not a formal opinion, Mr. Laird. It was merely a reading, and they gave me their input back. We didn't ask for a formal opinion from the attorney. We asked them to look at the statute.
Mr. Secretary.
And if you read it, I mean, this has nothing to do with whether you agree with the name or not. This is merely just the facts.
I agree. That's right.
Secretary, I agree, but once a decision is made, you can't reverse it. And obviously, it was the legislation was proposed back in September from Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. I agree with Mr. Laird. I do respect you, Mr. Secretary, but I'd like to have a lawyer who's Assistant Attorney General in the Youngkin administration to give us a definitive issue. All of us are not lawyers here, except for, I believe, one or two, I believe. Okay. All right. Excuse me. Okay. Well, yeah, that's right. You're in the UVA land, so it's, obviously got to give that respect. We've been accused of a few things, but I hear that. But I'm just saying is that all a board member, and I'm not going to be here after June. Everybody knows that. And I'll rotate off. But y'all have to work with a fellow board member, and I think it's out of due respect. He had some good questions. Now, he's a lawyer. Lawyers always have good questions, of course. But if this is settled, then we can vote on in June. And, I mean, it's a situation whereby once it's done, and there's no comeback on it if we find something that's not completely legit.
Listen, this board is entitled to do what this board wants to do in this regard. But for me personally, looking at this, forgetting what we're dealing with here, just the words that are on the page of the statute, just as clear as saying black and white. And
Well-
it says black, it doesn't say white.
Well, that's why you're Secretary of
And I don't need a
Transportation or
lawyer-
a board
I don't-
member.
Let me finish, Mr. Dozen. I don't need a lawyer to help me read the word black or the word white. I can do that without legal guidance. Now, we got it, okay, just to reaffirm, and the legal guidance was exactly what I just told you, which is it's clear. There is no requirement, there is no direction, there is no anything associated with guidelines that need to be developed with regard to this decision. It is eminently clear, without question. Now, put that aside, what you want to do and what you don't want to do is a separate matter. But I don't think to say that it's not clear is just.
Mr. Secretary, I will say, y'all know, Mr. Loss, the reason he's not here is his daughter, youngest child, is graduating from Washington Lee University, which is interesting since we're talking about Lee Highway. So I'm just saying, going forward, for y'all to work with him as a representative of the Commonwealth Transportation Board, at-large member for the state, I'm just doing due respect working with him. Thank you.
Anyone else on the substitute? Mr. Coleman?
The information I received last month would indicate that majority of the respondents to the survey weren't in favor of the name change. I'm very sensitive to that. Has anything changed since last month that would indicate more people are in support of the name change, or is it the same statistics?
My understanding was the actual statistics that were shared with us from Fairfax County was that there were more people who were in favor of keeping the names, but when you look at the breakdown, many of the folks who responded were from outside of the corridor. They weren't directly on the corridor, so there was a very small number of folks who were actually on the corridor who responded, but they all responded generally in favor of the name change. I don't know if Fairfax County, if you have anything you want to add to that.
I'd to add to
Okay.
it, there were, for Route 29, there were 11,652 people who wanted to keep the name, 8,032 that wanted to change it. Route 50, 10,904, keep the name, 7,960, change the names. I would just point out that this is one non-scientific survey. And there's 10 board members who are elected by the general population in Fairfax County, and there is no doubt in our mind that this is largely supported by our community in Fairfax County, or we politically wouldn't have moved forward with this. And so there's been tremendous outreach outside of just this one survey that we seem to be fixated on. And, you know, I've heard from, as I mentioned earlier in my comments, countless business people who frankly have told me point blank that these names do not represent the reasons why they make investments in Fairfax County, and they have applauded the opportunity to make sure that we remove divisive names and focus on simplicity for our drivers, commuters in the area, and therefore focus on the route numbers. And so we've had a lot of input on this over multiple years. But this was the one survey that was done that, again, is non-scientific and frankly is a close call. And if you're in politics like I am and you're soliciting public input, you know going in that you're a whole lot more likely to hear from people who are opposed to something than people who are for it. And the fact that these numbers were as close as they were, I think is notable. And frankly, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you as someone who represents the 1.2 million people in Fairfax County if I wasn't confident that this was something that they supported.
Mr. Coleman?
Have you been able, thank you, Mr. Secretary, have you been able to extract those outside of Fairfax County?
Outside of Fairfax County?
Well, the area that you mentioned
the
as
corridor.
demographics inside?
Yeah, in fact, the majority of the respondents were not along those two corridors.
Okay.
And so the numbers, just so you know, this was survey question number 2, is your current home or business located on Route 29 or Route 50? And 2,000 people answered yes, 19,513 people answered no.
Okay, so if you extracted those outside, would the vote be wildly in favor of the name change then?
For me, without a doubt, that would be the case. I mean, that would be a hypothetical and a projection, you know, on our part. But based on what we've seen and all the evidence that we've heard and the respondents, I believe that would be absolutely correct.
Mr. Secretary, one question, Chairman McKay. So all the people who voted, expressed their opinion were Fairfax County residents?
That I don't know. I would ask we have folks here from DOT if they want to answer that technically. I don't know that.
You don't get into the weeds, you can get into the weeds that easy.
Good morning, Greg Stevenson, Acting Director of Fairfax County Department of Transportation. So,
Welcome, Ms. Stevenson. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
thank you. So the survey was open to all. So while we reached out and tried to collect information from Fairfax County, the survey was not only open to people in Fairfax County. So it doesn't necessarily mean that people who responded in this survey were even Fairfax County residents, quite frankly.
Let me just add one thing to this. I think you all are abundantly clear of the fact that we voluntarily entered into this survey. We voluntarily set up an entire task force to work on this for multiple years, none of which is a requirement because our board was interested in hearing from the public. But our board does not have the responsibility of only doing what a majority of the public wants us to do at all times. We have to act on behalf of what we think is right for our jurisdiction. And so when I point out this survey as but one way in which people with us, I do want to emphasize that we went out of our way to put this out so that we could hear feedback from people and most candidly be able to address the feedback, which is one of the reasons for the survey for us was also to determine if you supported changing the name, what would you like it changed to? And that's where overwhelmingly the respondents supported changing it to Route 29 and Route 50. And so this whole survey exercise for us was designed to get multiple inputs on multiple questions from people in a non-scientific way as one guidepost for our board to consider when we put forward the resolution to you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Secretary, I would call the question since obviously the substitute motion reflects having board member Ty Lawson to be here in June to express his opinion and have more information from the Assistant Attorney General. I'll call the question.
All right, motion's been called, the question's been called.
For the second motion.
The substitute motion is that we delay the vote on, and let's just make it 1 and 2.
Yes, sir.
We delay the vote on 1 and 2 until our following meeting in June, per the request of Mr. Lawson and per your motion.
Yes, sir. We have a recorded vote,
A
please.
motion by Mr. Dodson and a second by Mr. Laird. Is that correct? All right. All in favor of affirming the substitute motion and delaying the consideration to next month, say aye.
Can we record a vote, please?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody in favor, raise your hand. So the recorded
vote, I would imagine this.
Mr. Laird, right, Mr. Byers, Mr. Dodson, Mr. Coleman, Ms. Sellers vote aye. And those who vote no, Dr. Smoot, Ms. Hines, Mr. Yates, Mr. Kasparitz, Mr. Merrill, Mr. Stant, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Folks vote no. The noes have it. Substitute is defeated. We now have a motion and we have a second on item 1 only. I'm going to take them separately. We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Mr. Merrill.
Yes, Mr. Secretary, I'd like to make an alternative motion.
Second substitute.
Yes, and my second substitute would be that we affirm the renaming as requested, subject to confirmation from legal that we have the authority to do so. Whatever that policy was, it was referenced by Mr. Lawson.
Legal's given us the
Second.
We have the authority.
Can I speak? I'll speak.
We've got a motion and we have a second. Further discussion.
Can I speak to that? So I am not the CTB's lawyer, but as a lawyer who advises boards and organizations, what I can tell you is that there's a reason that there are 2 tables in front of a judge and that there's a judge. It's because 2 lawyers can interpret a statute differently. And then the judge gets to take their way in at it, and then there's an appellate court and there's a Supreme Court. the boards, any board, any leadership team is not directed by legal guidance. They're advised. But at the end of the day, we are charged with making the decision based upon our individual reading and understanding of the statute. And I worked with Mr. Yates several years ago on the task force, and the process was, this issue was vetted and studied, and we had legal counsel there to guide us through that process. So this is not an issue of first impression for this board, for the task force and the committee that worked on this. So as the chairman and secretary has stated, I think many of us are very clear on the interpretation of the statute, and the question raised is not germane to the decision or the request of Fairfax County. The process was, we were deferring to the locality. If the locality then made a request, this board would evaluate that request. I think Fairfax has been very generous with providing us an insight into their process, how they have assessed and reached their conclusion. But ultimately, what we said as a board is that we would rely on the locality. And that's the process that's been established. You know, with all respect to Mr. Merrill and the conditioning of the approval, what I can tell you is lawyers would love to run the world, right? But we don't get to, right? We get to advise, right? And so at the end of the day, there are times that I've had clients that, Carlos, they say, Carlos, I agree with you. That's great advice. Or they say, Carlos, I don't agree with you. And we're going to, you know, move forward a different direction. Actually, we have a few other lawyers here, right, that understand that. So I would not make a motion here conditioned upon subsequent legal advice, because I can tell you, I can pick 5 lawyers and you're going to get 5 different opinions if you want it. At the end of the day, we have to be resolute in what we want to do. We have to believe in our own God-given reason to understand the statute. We have to respect the process, again, that Mr. Yates and I went through I don't know if it was almost a year-long process looking at this with counsel. And at the end of the day, I just don't know that subsequent legal guidance will change or move this. I think what it does, unfortunately, is continues to create uncertainty around the outcome, which I don't know that anyone would appreciate, especially the folks in Fairfax County. So I apologize for wearing a dual hat here, but I would respectfully ask you not approve that motion. If you don't want to do this, then just don't do it, but do not do it conditioned upon some additional legal guidance that's, at the end of the day, just going to be someone else's opinion.
Now, I'll move to withdraw my motion then, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Merrill. So we have a original motion and a second. Original motion is to approve item number 1, action on highway renaming, portion of US 29 to Route 29. Is there further discussion? Stamp.
At my age, I wake up often in the middle of the night. Most of the time I can get back to sleep, but last night it kept me up, seriously. And it's something I thought about and thought about and thought about, and I kind of wrote down some thoughts I had this morning. So if you all bear with me for a minute, I'll tell you what I was thinking. The first question that came to me was, where does it stop? We're looking at a subset of flawed 19th century Virginians, after whom roadways were named 100 or 50 or 30 years ago. And that's what we're looking at. And when my friends Ray Smoot and Tom Folks drive home tomorrow down 81, they'll see a plethora of 500 square foot signs, Lee Highway, here and there, all the way up and down Route 81. The question then, should it become the policy of this board to change those signs on its own volition, or just wait until we're requested to do so by local government authorities? It's not an issue that we need to talk about today. And remember, there's another subset of Virginians, flawed Virginians, in the 18th century, who may come before us for name changes at a later date. Those 18th century Americans are just as important as anybody else. And there's also a subset of 20th century Virginians, after whom roads and towns and things have been named. What are we going to do about those? So that's my question. Where is it going to end? Now, with respect to this specific resolution, as I said, 50 or 100 or 30 years ago, various governing bodies named, sought to name these roadways after these Virginians, to honor the memories of those Virginians. And we're now asked to rescind that honor. They honored those Virginians, now we're asked to rescind that honor. I don't have any problem with that. I think that they probably should be rescinded, that honor that was bestowed on them. But the issue is, what do you do with those memories? Memories of those Virginians. And it's the memories that bother me. And what are memories? Memories are history. And we can only learn from history by learning history and not erasing it. Bottom line is, I'm voting to rescind that honor. I'm voting in favor of these resolutions, but it wasn't something that came easily.
Thank you, Mr. Stamp. Anyone else? All right, I'll call for the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
No.
Are there any abstentions? Chair rules the ayes have it. Everyone in agreement? Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item number 2, action on highway naming, renaming portion of US Route 50 to Route 50 in Fairfax County. Mr. President.
Second item
Nothing to
here.
be said.
Not a whole lot to be said, sir.
Mr. Secretary, I move approval.
Ms. Hines makes the motion, Mr. Casper seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no.
No.
Are there any abstentions? Chair rules the ayes have it. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item 3, action on commemorative naming of a bridge described as being located at, quote, at the forks in the Stonaga, Osaka, Rada roads at the southern end of Mud Lick Yards. There you go. Which bridge is known as bridge number 1055 in the Appalachian area of Wise County. Mr. Prezioso.
Yes, sir. This is a request from the County of Wise, from that Board of Supervisors. They passed a resolution on April 13th of this year asking the board to consider commemorative naming of the bridge over Callahan Creek on Route 78 in Wise County to be named the Paul E. Trammell Memorial Bridge. Mr. Trammell was a resident of Appalachia, Virginia. He was born in nearby Rhoda, Virginia in 1937. He spent several years as an educator in the area at multiple schools. He was part of the planning district at Lenowisco when it started back in the early 60s. He also spent 29 years supporting human resources at the local coal industry and other sites. He was a longtime married man in the area with 2 children and multiple grandchildren. And the county's resolution indicates that Mr. Trammell left the world better than he found it. And everyone who knew him was better because he decided to pass our way.
Thank you, sir. Is there a motion?
Mr. Secretary, I move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Folks. Mr. Folks moves. Is there a second? Sellers seconds. All in favor, please join me in standing to affirm. Very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Smoot.
we have acted on the various naming matters before, so that water is now over the dam. But I continue to be troubled that we may be, and we have one member who wrote a letter, that we may not be operating under all the policy direction or procedures that we should. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm in no position to judge that. But I do hope that perhaps we could have a review, not around any particular naming, but just have the person in the Attorney General's office look at our policies and procedures and either come back and tell us at some future time that we perhaps had a little sloppy administration this was dealt with earlier, or that everything is fine. I think we should ignore the concern that has been brought before us, and I don't want to elevate it into a 3-hour discussion within this board, but I would like the Attorney General's office to look at this, tell us we need to make some change, or what we're doing is fine and move on.
Dr. Smoot, the way the way this body operates, we don't have nexus as individual members to the Attorney General's office. The board has as a whole, and the secretary does, and the chairman of the board does. In this case, and I'm happy to give you and Mr. Lawson whatever you want, because I think that's appropriate. In this case, it appeared to me when we looked at this and looked at the body of evidence that we had, including the committee that went back and looked at this in 21, that the statute was perfectly clear, and the points that Mr. Lawson raised were not accurate or germane. The Attorney General, Ms. Lance, looked at that matter. She got with me and said, I've looked at it, I've reviewed it, and this is my opinion, not a formal opinion. This is just informal opinion, that it's very clear, there's no ambiguity, and that what Mr. Lawson had raised in his concern was legitimate, but it had nothing to do with this. It had to do with naming of private entities. And in the statute, the private entities are set out separately, and there's a process that's different for private entities. And it talks about setting up guidelines for the process for private entities. That's what's not occurred, okay? That didn't occur when you go back. We don't have those guidelines for private entities. This is not a private entity. It has nothing to do with that. And the Attorney General concurred. The Assistant Attorney General informally concurred with that and said, absolutely, there's no question. So that's how we move forward. That's why I said, and listen, my personal beliefs I've not even brought to this body yet. The things that I've been doing here in terms of this matter have been about, are we on the right ground? Are we following the right process? Are we doing it the right way? And then we vote for what we vote for. I don't vote ever unless y'all are tied. So I don't even weigh in on that respect. But in terms of the process, I'm clear without any concern. I'm happy to bring that back to all of us. And what we probably ought to do, to your point, Dr. Smoot, is there is some unfinished business with guidelines for private entities, and we probably need to go fix those.
Right.
But now, I'm not expecting we're going to get a private entity coming up here wanting to change the road name, but it could happen, right? So we need to get our ducks in a row, to your point.
Exactly. Thank you.
We will do.
Mr. Chairman, not to belong this, but Ms. Maxwell supported our committee. I mean, she's right there in the room. And to your point, I believe there was one road in one road in Northern Virginia, I think, that this applies to currently, where we did this, we created this provision for one entity, and I believe one road in Northern Virginia where this issue is relevant, that's been raised here. And so I don't know, I just wanted to
But we
point
could,
out that.
and listen, again, we'll bring it back, but someone can apply to name a road after a private entity. Right? Doesn't happen very often, but they can, and they can do it tomorrow, and they can do it the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And there's a process, and one of the pieces of the process says the CTP will approve some guidelines. We haven't done that. So Mr. Lawson is dead right. It just has nothing to do with the one we were looking at.
That's my point.
Right? So we're going to go do that, right, because it's undone. Thankfully, we haven't tripped over it, and we'll get that tightened up.
Mr. Secretary, I would say if I pass, when y'all still on the board, don't name anything after me, okay?
So Dodson, you have to worry about that.
We'd have
Sir,
to wait for an application,
Your Honor.
Mr. Dodson.
I don't know what it's going to be, but we'll see.
You're going to outlive all of us, Mr.
Look,
Dodson.
I will defend your wishes to the end.
Rename it after your company.
Oh, yeah, right. Private entity.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, it was his birthday yesterday.
I'm not going to tell you what number, but the older it gets good because the memory after that. I'm a little older than you, Shep, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you all very much. It's delightful to be in Charlottesville today. The next item on the agenda is item number 4. It's action on the airport access to the Blue Ridge Regional Airport in Henry County. Mr. Dudley.
Good morning, Mr.
Welcome, sir.
Secretary and members of the board. Today, I'm following up on the presentation I made at last month's workshop, which provided a summary of an airport access program allocation request from the County of Henry for the Blue Ridge Regional Airport. Just as a reminder, the airport is expanding its runway to accommodate a broader range of aircraft and to expand its public services. The runway expansion creates the need to relocate Route 698 so that there is no conflict with the runway protection zone. Henry County is requesting the maximum of $650,000 to support the road's relocation. $150,000 of those allocations are required to be matched dollar for dollar. The VDOT Salem District and the Local Assistance Division support this allocation and request the board's approval. The Secretary, I move approval.
Thank you, Dr. Smoot.
Thought we'd lost you there for a minute.
Second.
I just needed a little bit of hydration. Dr. Smoot made the motion. Mr. Merrill seconded it. Is there further conversation?
Mr. Secretary,
Yes, sir. Mr. Laird.
is there any commercial, Russ, is there any commercial traffic that goes into this airport?
Right.
Commercial freight?
All right, anyone else? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. With any abstentions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 5, Ms. Angel Deem, action on location decision review for Route 460 Southeast project.
Thank you. Good morning.
Stay around here long enough, these things just come back.
I do. So consistent with the board's policy on the review of location decisions that have occurred 3 years or more ago, the board has before it a resolution regarding the Route 460 Southeast project. As reviewed with you all last month, this project has not advanced since that location decision was made in 2015. The project remains unfunded. Therefore, the resolution recommends rescinding that February 2015 location decision. We recommend approval.
Motion. Is there a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Mr. Stant moves. Mr. Casper seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. With any abstentions? Very much. Ms. Pryor, item number 6, action on revised 2023-2028 6-year improvement program transfers.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I have my normal monthly transfers. They're provided to you in your packet, and I recommend your approval.
So moved.
Ms. Hines moves, Ms. Sellers seconds. Is there further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you very much. Ms. Pryor, number 7, action on addition of projects up to the revised 6-year improvement program for fiscal years 23 through 28.
Thank you. I have 3 projects being recommended for addition to the program. 2 are in Hampton Roads associated with the Jamestown Ferry and funded with federal funds for that purpose. And the 3rd project is in Chesterfield County, a study funded with local funds, and I recommend your approval.
So move.
Second.
Mr. Stant makes the motion. Dr. Smoot seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? Let me say one thing, just because I was thinking about it when Ms. Pryor talked about the ferry. So each of you should one day go to Richmond, get on the Capitol Trail, ride down to Jamestown, get on the ferry, and go across the James River, and then slide down into Southampton Roads, go through Surrey and Sussex. And it is a magnificent journey. And getting on that ferry is a heck of a lot of fun. Scott, you can get on with your bike.
I'm going to do
You
this.
get right in Richmond, ride on down there on your bike and go on across. I just would encourage you each to do that if you have a little bit of time. Go down Route 5, some of that history you talked about, Mr. Stantz, along Route 5. And it's just a fantastic thing, so I just wanted it. Yeah, absolutely. Come on, 2 nights for you. All right, I digressed. Item number 8, action on Smart Scale Round 5 consensus scenario. Ms. Pryor, drum roll.
Thank you. Yesterday, Ms. Jackson and I briefed you on changes to the staff recommended scenario for Smart Scale Round 5. The changes were presented to you. They're also laid out in the resolution before you, and we recommend your approval.
So moved.
Chair is going to recognize Mr. Brown.
Second.
Move approval.
Mr. Kasperitz, the long-standing member, moves for the second. Takes the second. All right, so we have a motion and we have a second. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Are there any abstentions? Congratulations. Well
Thank
done.
you.
The final, the next item on the agenda is Mr. Ben Coker and our bids. Mr. Coker.
Morning, Mr. Secretary.
Very
members of the board.
businesslike this morning. Sir, you got some bad bids in here you're trying to get through, or what?
I sure hope not, sir. Green is good.
Dressed up, looking sharp.
Thank you, sir. I have one project for consideration.
But you might get the purple shirt thing working like Dudley's got. You know what I'm saying?
It is the color of king,
He's
sir.
looking good. He's looking
Good answer.
Thank you, Mr. Coker. You continue, please.
So we have one project, order number J67. This is in the Nova District. It's a state of good repair bridge rehab project in Arlington on I-395. We had 6 bidders. The low bid was $5.6 million, just under. It was within range to Fort Myer Construction Corporation, Washington, D.C. I recommend approval.
Move approval, Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Hines makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Merrill seconds. Is there further discussion? All in? You got the last one.
I don't know if it works if you just like randomly assign.
Yes, there is.
I did have a comment.
But it's arbitrary.
Yeah, it's good to see
Mr.
the
Casper.
robust level of competition on this with 6 bidders.
And
Sure, we got a very competitive
6 in
price.
green. And last month, we had good ones, too. So
As
it's
well,
really good
as
to
well.
see.
I
Really
commend
good
them
to see.
on their efforts.
Absolutely. Anyone else? All right, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Coker.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Is there any new business to come before the board? Let me say.
Mr. Secretary, I was going to ask,
Mr.
y'all
Dodson.
determined the June meetings yet?
Excuse me?
Yeah, you had determined the June meeting yet? I think there was some discussion about switching the dates.
Yeah, well, I've got some scheduling difficulties, but it looked like y'all had as many as I did when we tried to flex. And so the numbers didn't work. So we're going to keep it where it is.
Thank you.
Okay? I was just seeing if you had flexibility, and the answer was not a lot. So I'll just do what I have to do. Exactly. I was cherry picking. Yeah. Just kidding. Sean, where's Sean? Stand up, sir. Thank you for having us in your district, sir. It's been great to be here, and we appreciate the well wishes from the Charlottesville team as well. As I often do, but it's not often enough. When we take this show on the road, it creates a lot of work for a lot of people. And we sort of show up and waltz in and get in our rooms and have dinner and go to our meetings, but all this stuff around here, somebody's got to bring here, got to set up, got to babysit, monitor, and everything else. And so all the staff that comes here to support us, both on the technical side, but also on the regular side, we know that it impacts you and it makes it harder to do your job. But we feel it's important to get out here into the districts, and that's why we're here, and we're happy to do it.
We need to thank Captain Byers and Greg Yates
Certainly do.
for their hospitality as well.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Would you like to add anything?
No.
Thank you for coming, too, by the way.
You Hampton Road guys.
Thanks, Captain Byers.
Sleep deprivation.
Thank all of y'all for everything that you do. Really appreciate that. Carlos, now just because we let you make the motion in the May meeting doesn't mean you can't, like, miss the June, you got to be there. Both meetings, Carlos, both. Mr. Dodson?
What's up?
Same thing.
Whatever you say, sir.
Here's what I say. Meeting adjourned.